identifying the people you need to get involved early. Make sure you have everyone aware that you're going to be doing this new implementation. You're looking at this new process, so that everyone can chime in. Everyone can give you feedback on like, hey, these are some things we think would be beneficial to help us with as well if we could conclude it. And you really get the full picture of what are you looking to accomplish out of this.
Welcome to Actualizing Success. In this podcast series, our in-house advisors discuss today's finance and technology topics with an emphasis on solutions that embrace tomorrow.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Actualizing Success. My name is Hunter Atchison. I'm a manager at Actualize Consulting, and I'm joined by Actualize Senior Manager John Kruger and Manager Kwame Twum to take a deep dive into Actualize by meeting our consultants and understand the Actualize outlook that drives projects to success.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hunter. Appreciate it. Thank you, John, as well for joining. As this the name of this podcast talks about the glass half full mindset. I wanted to kind of give you guys an opportunity to allow you guys to talk about what that mindset means to you, and then we can kind of go into some questions about it, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hunter, if you want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the positive mentality of having the glass half full is what allows me to drive to get all my projects completed and making sure that I'm driving to have the best work that we can. If you have kind of a more negative outlook, you're going to find yourself in more situations that are just not a great outcome. Whereas if you have that positive outlook, you can always look to say, okay, maybe we can work around this. How can we make this better? Let's look at the overall process and let's enhance it. And so it ends up just resulting in a better product from, and just a better time on projects as well.
Yeah. And I think too, it's hard for everybody to do that, right? I mean, I know that things don't go your way. Things don't go the way that you thought as you planned. And it's very easy to, get down on things or just look at things negatively, or for even your client to not have the best start, not have the best kickoff, and then they have sort of a bad outlook on things, or they just have that feeling that this isn't going as I planned, right? But if you as the consultant are the stabilizer, you're the one that's there that knows what to do, knows which levers to push and pull, and try to get the morale up and the confidence up in whoever you're working with. And I think just having that silver lining mentality, trying to find the good, find the way that you can fix things based on your experience too. I mean, you always have strategies that you can go to and you say, oh, I know this is going to work. This is tried and true. I can do it. And, at that point, it's just enforcing that confidence from your perspective and really having a calm demeanor, right? A relaxed demeanor, not showing that, hey, things might not be going the way that you planned either, right? But not showing that, not wearing it on your sleeve as best as you can, right? And just being a partner with the client for sure.
Awesome. Thank you both. I think leading from that, I'd love to kind of talk about how it applies to, the daily life of consulting. And so my first question talks about, many believe that optimism fuels innovation. Have you ever experienced cases where glass half full perspective encouraged more creative problem solving for clients?
Yeah, I'll start here. I think, I think like kind of to the point earlier, it's like you have a plan. You think it's going to go a certain way, and then you don't really think outside the box too much because you're so in that moment of like, I have to follow these steps, right? I have to do it this way because this is the way that it's planned. But you also only know so much about the client when you first meet them, right? So it's building the relationships, it's understanding the tools that they have at their dispense, how equipped and experienced they are with different things, whether it be the different business tools they have, different systems, different whatever it might be, strategies of their own, resources internally. And then you could think, oh, well, I might be able to leverage that and come up with this creative solution. So absolutely. I think, it's all about asking questions, gaining an understanding, but having that thought that like, I'm going to make this work no matter what. And then but it doesn't have to always be the same way. Right. And I can use the client, use myself, and just kind of put those things together. And it also helps to, I think, keep you as a consultant kind of on your toes and invigorated, right? Because you're trying to come up with these creative solutions. It's not just you pushing the same buttons every single time, right? And again, sometimes you have to fall back on that, but I mean, overall, I think it's fun to sort of ask those questions, find things out, and come up with these creative solutions. So most definitely that drives the optimism, drives creative solutions. I agree.
Yeah, and definitely, like, with a lot of our clients, they're coming into a new system, right? They don't know what they're getting into. So if you're coming in like saying, yeah, we can do this, we're going to make this work, we have a really good plan for this, it makes it much easier for them to jump in and say, okay, we want to adopt this system, we want to make it better, so let's collaborate and make this system what we need it to be, right? And it helps make it better overall, as long as you have that positive outlook.
And just adding to that too, real quick, because I think a lot of clients will, or we will deal with a lot of clients, and it could be systems based, or it could be just general consulting, or it could be, finding out what they want to do in their overall, we deal with a lot of capital markets and treasury. So what are they doing with their entire finance or treasury or capital markets space on their side? And they don't even think that let's say they're implementing a system, they just think, well, this system's just going to do everything for me now. It's going to replace all the stuff that I already have. But then, well, what if we could leverage what you already have with this new system? And then that puts us in a position where we're like, all right, we're able to kind of see everything from that 10 to 20 to 30,000 feet view, rather than just being so, narrow in scope. It just opens up more doors, and it does bring more, it gets the wheels turning, and we get the clients involved too, because then they feel like they're contributing, right? They're not just being told what to do. They're also, helping out with that as well.
Great points. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, I wanted to kind of, we talked about innovation. I'd love to just hear, again, we've all been on projects. Not all of them are smooth sailing. So I'd love to hear from both of you, if you could provide an example of when a project didn't go as well as planned, and how a positive kind of, glass half full approach philosophy, helped your team learn and move forward.
There's been quite a few cases where, the project doesn't start out the way you want it to, whether that's, timelines are getting shifted because the availability of, maybe a bank isn't ready, you don't have the information you need to move forward, and so that very frequently puts kind of a damper on the project kickoff. But the biggest thing is just jumping back in and getting your mindset to be, okay, now we're finally kicking off, we have the information we need, let's just do a little bit of a reset, let's jump in and let's treat this as it's a new project, let's just get going into it. And from my projects, whenever we take that approach, there is, once you have that reset, everyone is just mind's cleared, they jump right back in, and we really do get a good kickoff. And everything in the past, you can't change it, right? It's going to happen. But let's make going forward better. Let's keep pushing forward.
Right.
Yeah. And try to mitigate, I think, as much as you can up front, right? I mean, as the trusted advisor to the client, it's our job to bring our experience to the table and inform them early on, like, these are the potential pitfalls that we're going to run into, right? Like, we have to deal with XYZ third party to get this going for you. And here's what we've seen happen, in the best of times and in the worst of times, right? So I think the more you kind of mitigate that up front and start that sort of partnership relationship immediately, like, try your best to find your strongest internal resource on their team. And you could kind of gauge, like, just from having those conversations initially, being involved, like, who's the person that I can go to where I can have these just, level-headed discussions about what the expectations are, right? Because there's always going to be some that are going to be thinking that things are just going to go perfectly and there's going to be no issues. And then there's others that might be sort of really hesitant to think that it's going to go well. And then you got to kind of meet in the middle there and find that level-headed ground and that common sense ground. So, I think identifying those resources that you can have those conversations with, and then also mitigating as much of it up front as you can, because when it does happen, it's like, hey, we knew this may come. I have a solution. We have a solution. This is how we could take care of it. And it does put everybody at ease, rather than you feeling like you've got to tackle something in the moment that you weren't prepared for, or that it looks that way, to the client, right? So, and that's, again, the glass half full, right? Just having those things at your disposal that you're ready to kind of tap into if you need them, and hopefully you don't. But if you have to, then a lot of it is a conversation, right? It's like just talking about it, getting everybody, calm down, and then, moving forward. And there's plenty of examples, unfortunately, but a lot of it has to deal with when things are out of your control. You have those third parties, right? Or you have those others that you need to kind of rely on. And, but again, the fact that we've seen it enough, I think just helps us to kind of give that client that positive experience.
I think to your point, the communication, I think is probably one of the biggest pieces, right? Just communicate, keep everyone in the loop, and keep that outlook of like, once this is ready, we're ready. Yeah. And that just helps so much.
Yeah, consulting, a lot of this is like, you don't have to know everything, but like you've got to know what to do in a situation, right? I mean, and you're going to learn how to eventually do everything with time and experience, but for the most part, you just need to know where to go to get that answer, or you need to know how to kind of take care of it in that moment so that you can get to the next phase and pull in the right people and get to the right resources and just have that plan in place and have those things at the ready for yourself. So yeah, it's less about, as I've been told, like just kind of going off the top and thinking everything, acting like you sound like you know everything, rather than just saying, hey, let me take this away and go get an answer for you. And that comes across a lot better. You're more genuine in that regard. You're communicating more, and they kind of understand that you guys are together working to figure this out.
Great points from you both. And I think you've touched upon, a lot of great ideas, thoughts, that kind of would help a lot of other people in similar situations. So I appreciate that. You guys have kind of talked right into my next kind of couple of questions segment, the client, right? I think it's super important to have a great relationship with a client, building trust, being that trusted advisor. So I'd love to just hear, from you guys on a couple questions around that. So clients sometimes are skeptical of consultants. How do you kind of address that skepticism while maintaining a positive kind of forward-looking attitude?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start. I think, it's tough, right? Because you think sometimes you might have that historical or person that looks at a consultant as like, yeah, these guys come in and they start billing us for work, and then what are they really doing, right? Or we want to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for, right? So, I mean, the biggest thing is for me is really just showing them that you're one of them, right? Like you are part of their team, and learning what they're doing, establishing those relationships, and not feeling like when you get a project that you're going to drive this to completion and leave, right? Like, and you're done. Like, it's just another task on your to-do list. The way I try to approach the clients now is like, whether or not we're going to do more work for them in the future, I always try to think like, what if this client was going to be with us forever? Like, what if this is going to be our client now for life?
Mm-hmm.
I want to set them up for as much success as I can. And whether they're implementing one piece now, what if it turns into 10 pieces later? I'm going to start building those foundational things that are going to help me to have those conversations later, but then also show that I care about what they're doing, right? So it's about learning what they're doing, getting involved, being one of them, not feeling like you're the outsider coming in and telling them what to do. It's really getting on their platform and helping them and becoming part of their team. I think that from the beginning, and I mean, not overdoing it, of course, like you got a lot of different projects you're on and whatnot, but there's simple things you could do to kind of gain a better understanding, and that alone will make them feel like they can trust you.
Hunter, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The first thought that came to my mind was getting in their shoes, right? They have these processes that are probably very complex. They've been working the same way for 10 years, 20 years, however long. So they're used to this. So if you're coming in, you're like, oh, no, we're going to do it completely differently. That's very disruptive. So you need to find a way to show them how this is better, how this is going to work for them, and allow them to see the process in action so that they can understand, okay, this is going to save me hours upon hours, in a day or in a week. And this is why it's so much better using, this technology that you have or using this new solution.
Yeah. And that's delicate, right? Because they've been doing this for a while. They're comfortable with it. And now you're going to come in and tell them you got to do it totally differently. And when you're doing that, you got to you can't be so heavy handed with that, right? You have to show them that like this happened to me once, right? I was in your shoes. Maybe you have that same experience because you worked in their environment, in the past or something. Like you have those things that you could bring up to kind of give them the comfort that, like, hey, first of all, we're not getting rid of your task. We're just trying to make it better. But also, yeah, you've been doing this for a while. Like, you can't just go and say, oh, this is why you're doing it this way. This is awful. Like, you can't go in there like with that attitude either, right? You got to have like a little bit of a middle ground where you can show them confidence, build trust, but then also explain to them that it's going to be better, right? And we're going to show you how to do it. We're going to set up a strategy and a plan to get you there, so that you won't feel like your job's going away, or like the way you do it is no good. It's just trying to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And I think, talking about, all those kind of techniques you guys mentioned, I'd love to just hear, if there's any additional strategies or techniques that you find to be most effective when building a long-term trust with the client, and kind of also utilizing that to manage challenging situations such as scope creep or misaligned expectations.
Yeah, so the first piece, touched on it a bit, but I think just to kind of elaborate, and I have examples of projects where you build all this trust with certain people, and then they up and they leave and they go find another position, right? And then you have to start all over again and kind of build it from the ground up. So finding those folks that are really motivated, that want to make their situation better, easier, more efficient, understanding who they are, and then trying to have them be an internal champion for what it is that you're trying to implement, so that when you're not there, they're sort of waving the flag internally, right? Like, yeah, this is going to work. It's going to go well. Everything is good. I got it. I'm handling it. I'm working with John on this, Hunter on that, whatever it is. And that helps, right? I mean, to get an internal person on your side. But then also, not really, like, as a consultant, we're not, we don't have to worry about who we talk to, or we're just asking questions. I mean, a lot of what we do is asking questions, trying to figure out what the solution might be. So try to build those relationships with treasurers, with C-level folks if you can, managers, people that are in these positions where they make the decisions, so that when you're making your decisions for maybe the people in the controlled environments you're working in, you have that sort of full picture thought that they want, what they're trying to do, right? And building that trust as high up and as wide as you can go, because a lot of it is regional too, right? Like, you might be working in the US, but then all of a sudden they have a UK team or an APAC team or whatever, and they have the same kind of folks over there in the same positions. So let's work with them too. Let's make their lives a little bit easier if we can. And with that comes scope creep, right? Things that we weren't really maybe thinking about. So I think one of the things too is understanding the requirements up front is huge, but we all know as we go through things change, right? And then somebody's like, oh, I forgot we do this report, or I forgot we talk to this individual, or we need this for this person in this room and whatnot. So it's not about saying, well, we can't do that because it's not in scope. It's just about, well, all right, well, let's talk about this. Let's gauge the level of effort, and then let's see kind of where we go from there. And it just puts a better wrapper around it, right? Like, you're not so rigid. You're not so like, full stop, we're not doing that, right? Like, you're not in that mode, and you're able to have those more exploratory conversations, because maybe that's going to lead into more work for us, where we could add onto our agreement, work with them for a longer period of time, and so on, right? So I would say never, as a consultant, you're always probing, you're always asking, you're always trying to find out, and I don't want to say you're never saying no, but you're saying, well, let's find out, right? you're not saying no, but you're saying, well, let's talk about it and find out, right? Because I'm sure there's a solution that we could come up with that everybody would be happy with.
Great. Hunter, did you have any other thoughts or comments around this topic?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The biggest part of kicking up a new project and working on the scope is understanding who needs to be involved. So if you get all of the correct people together, at the start of the project, it really helps prevent that scope creep, or, maybe some things down the line that need to change, because you're having the conversation with the right people. Now, finding the right people is not always the easiest thing. So you may not be able to get all of the right people, but at least, trying to mitigate it up front is very helpful for the long term of the project, because you have a really clear picture of what needs to be done. And then ultimately, whenever the project's done and you have those conversations with all those people that are maybe 30 different departments, you now have some relation with them to say, in the future, if they need help with something, we're here to help them, and we're here to strive to make it better for them.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we're close to wrapping up, but there's one last topic that I want to talk through, that I'm sure impacts everybody, not just in our profession, but all professions, right? It talks about overcoming obstacles. I'm wondering if either of you or both of you could share a significant, professional obstacle you faced and how you maintained a positive outlook to overcome it.
I think the first thing I thought of when I saw this was my own personal ability to delegate was always a trouble spot for me. And I think being a worker, somebody who wants to get their hands on it and do it and say, I did this, right? And everybody needs to see that I did this. That was kind of my mindset for a very long time. And it's very tactical, right? I mean, I worked in support. I worked in, client support type roles. So a lot of it was like, I have an issue. All right, well, I'm going to fix it. And then that's how I get my, gratification. Right. But I think as a consultant, you at least in the positions that we're in here, you can't do all of this by yourself, right? It's impossible. So you have to feel comfortable with saying, I have this project, I have this work I need to do. I can do it, but I know this person would be really good at it. And I think I want to get them involved, and I want to get them the exposure. So let's pull them in, right? And let's get them going. And for me to be able to do that personally was tough, because now I feel like, well, am I going to be looked at as somebody who doesn't want to do this or can't do it? Or, I want to be the one that kind of, does this, right? And has the pot of gold at the end, right? But at the end of the day, it was just mentally something that's like, hey, you got these resources. These folks are really smart. We work with a ton of smart people every day. And let's get people exposure, right? And let's get everybody involved. And there's still plenty of things that you can do, even though you're not pressing buttons, right? I mean, there's all the relationships that we talked about, this project management, there's other things. So it's just kind of having that in your tool set, being versatile like that, and not feeling like you're not doing something because you're taking that approach. It's really, you're helping actually by bringing others along and giving everybody this exposure. So, I mean, delegation was tough for me, but I've learned to, and at times I'm still, a little bit with it, but like, for the most part, something that I've been able to kind of, build on. And I think for consultants, it's a huge thing, right? It's a huge thing to leverage your resources.
Yeah. And I think, I think that I am a testament to that success for you. I mean, I've worked, I started, and you were one of the first people I worked with. And whenever I first came in here, my obstacle was I had never worked in consulting before. I had no idea what I was getting into. And, I just had my son, right? He was a month old whenever I started. So you're coming from into a new job. I'm overwhelmed with what the expectations are. And, one of the first people that I worked with was John here to get me up to speed and teach me how to work with payments, how to work with Kruger, how to interact with clients, and be like, hey, it's not really that scary. Right. So, I think for my obstacle, the biggest thing of that is there's people here to help you, right? You have people who are going to be there to support you. You have team members, and all you need to do is just reach out and be like, hey, I need a little bit of help. And they're going to be willing to do so.
I appreciate that, Hunter. But that means I'm old, right? That means that I have experience, and I'm an old man now. But I in all seriousness, I appreciate that. Yeah, for sure. And I listen, it helps when someone like yourself is willing, right? I mean, willing to get involved, willing to take ownership, and not be afraid. I think that's the thing. It's like, it's sort of that fear factor, right? Like, but at the end of the day, it's if you have that strategy, you've got that loose blueprint in your head of how you want to approach things. And at the end of the day, if you feel like, where am I going to go from here? It's like, just kind of fall back on those same principles, right? Like, am I doing what I have to do? Here's the questions I could ask. Here's the levers I can pull, those sorts of things. And for the most part, it works out, right? I mean, because you're genuine in that regard. You're more, you're showing that you care, right? So, but I appreciate that, Hunter. Thank you.
Awesome. I think we're close to wrapping up. I got one last question for you guys, and then we can kind of highlight at the end if there's any, things you want to re-emphasize. But my question talks about common pitfalls, right? What should a new or seasoned consultant look for, right? How can they proactively avoid the pitfalls that you've experienced, that you've heard about? Love to just hear you guys' insight on that.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Hunter. Go ahead. You take this one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think for this one, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but scope creep, I think, is one of the bigger pitfalls that we see. So identifying the people you need to get involved early, make sure you have everyone aware that you're going to be doing this new implementation. You're looking at this new process, so that everyone can chime in. Everyone can give you feedback on, like, hey, these are some things we think would be beneficial to help us with as well if we could include it. And you really get the full picture of what are you looking to accomplish out of this, right? If you're just looking at a very narrow view and you're saying, this one process, it sucks. I want to fix it. Well, how does that tie to everything else they're doing? What if we fix that process, but we fix 10 others that all now are automated? They're all working together, talking together, and you have, several hours a week that you're now able to move forward with, to do other things and other enhancements. So get that scope, understand what the project is that you want to accomplish, and then move forward with that.
Yeah, and be as open with your communication as you can, right? I mean, if you feel like they're trying to bite off more than they can chew, I mean, let them know that, right? Tell them that, hey, this stuff takes time, or we could get it done this way a little bit quicker, or let's start with one group, implement whatever we're doing, and then we can move it to other groups, right? There's different strategies that you could work with. Just be open with that, right? I mean, and if a client comes to you and they have a plan, if you feel like, again, that there's some things in there that are going to take a little more time than they're anticipating, or we need more resources, like just communicate that, right? Immediately tell them what you're thinking. And I think commonly a pitfall is that, right? Is that you just sort of, you listen and then you just say, all right, we're just going to go with it, right? But think about it, right? Like, does this make sense, right? And have you done it this way in the past? Is there a better way to do it? And then just be open with that, because that way 6 months from now, when they're saying, well, how come it's like this now? It wasn't, it's like you can go back to it and say, well, we talked about this, talked about the approach, right? So just having those things open and on the table up front is huge. And I think is an easy thing to do early on, right? Is to just have truthful, honest discussions, tell them what you're thinking, and that way, there's no surprises down the road. I mean, listen, scope changes. Unfortunately, that stuff does change. I think you try to get as much as you can up front. I agree 100%, Hunter. I think you pull in as many people as you can. You pull in every possible resource you can to identify the scope. But at the same time, too, it's being truthful about and open about the communication, so that it doesn't come back to kind of haunt you later. So those two things combined, I think, are really common and easy things that you can tackle up front and try to avoid those issues and pitfalls down the road.
Awesome. Great. I think that kind of concludes, where I was going this topic around the glass half full, talking about clients, talking about trust, talking about, obstacles. I just want to reiterate that, Actualize has a monthly podcast, and you can find them on the website. You can find them on LinkedIn. I want to thank Hunter and John for taking the time to share some of these answers and, around the topics that we had, and I look forward to doing the next one with you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Kwame. I appreciate it. Thanks, Hunter.
Thank you, everyone. And if they include this as well, make sure you join us next time, where John and I are going to be interviewing Kwame, flipping the table on him.
He's not getting off that easy.
I'll be prepared for sure. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Actualizing Success. Make sure to visit us online at www.actualizeconsulting.com, where you can explore our service offerings. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or your preferred platform. If you've enjoyed what we talked about today, please consider leaving a review and following us on LinkedIn. If you have any questions or would like to share your opinions with us, please send us a note at podcast@actualizeconsulting.com. We look forward to hearing from you.